As expected, the Steelers hired Brian Angelichio to be their new offensive coordinator, but they also added a new secondary coach in Whitt Jr. We'll talk about those two hires and are the Steelers guilty of committing too much buddy hiring? We discussed that topic with Josh Taylor. He's back on the show from KDKA TV. We got that and our Stars and Skulls tight end grades on the season. I'm Chris Carter. This is the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things of the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. Thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And a reminder, today's episode, as every Thursday episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL and you'll get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup only on Prize Picks. As I said before, we're joined by Josh Taylor of KDKA TV. You know him, you love him. He's back here to give his amazing work. And I always love bringing Josh in when we talking coaching trees and we talking coaching history because this man can connect more dots than anybody I have ever met. So I am truly impressed here by all of his knowledge and experience. But Josh, we got to talk about the new moves. We talked about this yesterday. We expected this move with Brian Angelichio. The Vikings pass game coordinator is now the Steelers' official new offensive coordinator. Nothing too shocking there based off of how this week has gone. But also we did get a little bit of a shock. Whitt Jr. is hired to be the team's secondary coach. Whitt Jr., another one of those guys that comes along with Mike McCarthy. He was the cornerbacks coach for the Packers from 2009 until 2017. And then he, of course, then joined the Cowboys when McCarthy took over there. He was their defensive backs coach for 3 years before he became defensive coordinator for the Commanders for 2 years. And now he lands with the Steelers. Josh, we talked about how Brian Angelichio had good. His passing game was good for 3 years of his time with the Vikings. He's going to be involved with the game planning behind the scenes, of course, not calling plays, but he had Whitt Jr. What do you make of these two specific hires as far as filling out Mike McCarthy's staff?
The thing of adding Brian Angelichio that I'm very intrigued by, you mentioned it, the success that they have with the passing game when he was in Minnesota. That stands out to me. Another thing that stands out to me is his history of developing tight ends as tight end coach. Mm-hmm. By the way, shout out to our colleague Doran Dickerson, who told us almost a week ago, hey, look out for this name as a new offensive coordinator. Then again, that's what happens when your old position coach is the guy in question. I guess that's what you can do that when you're the All-American like Doran. Shout out to Doran. But yeah, I'm very intrigued about his success in the passing game and his success as far as developing tight ends. Because if there's two things this offense can use almost immediately, it's an upgrade as far as success in the passing game and probably an upgrade in the development of the tight ends. One in particular, whom everybody thought was probably underutilized very morosely in Pat Freiermuth. And when you talk about what we wanted to see from this offense this season, it seems like he checks off a couple of those boxes of what you want to see. Then you bring in Mike McCarthy, who likely will be calling plays, and you probably see another box checked off as far as the timeliness of play calling and sequencing and scripting that first drive of the game. All of this stuff starts to layer up here. And you're looking at some of those things that you need to see corrected. Now you're starting to see those things corrected. On the Whitt side of things, I think some people who made some of the same complaints in cases during the season might have to go back and revise what they said or maybe put a couple back in the draft folder because Whitt Jr. as a secondary coach or even as a defensive coach as a whole, hate to say it, folks, turnover culture guy.
Yeah.
He's one of them. So every place he's gone when he coaches DBs, folks, they get picks. They got picks in Green Bay when he was there. They got a lot of picks in Dallas when he was there. His guys get picks. His DBs do. It's something that he preaches. So that you were bothered by the turnover culture, as I say often on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, hashtag fear the turnover, more of that's coming if he's involved in your secondary. So from that perspective of checking off the boxes that each unit might need, I think this is a as far as to be more successful next season as opposed to last season, I'm all for it.
And so that's the thing here is that this is something that Nick and I talked about just on yesterday's episode, was that the one thing that might be missing from this Steelers defense when they take the field was that turnover culture, because everyone that was part of it is now gone. Jared Alexander now with the Vikings, they thought he would be the DB's coach. Denzel Martin, outside linebackers coach. They also had a new outside linebackers coach yesterday. So they've made all these moves. Carl Dunbar, another part of it, gone. The only guy left is Scott McCurley, and he was there for a year. He wasn't part of it. He didn't create this turnover culture in the early 2020s with these guys. But Joe Whitt can be a guy that can be part of that. Now, again, Joe Whitt's part of it from the cornerback sense. He's coached up guys like Javon Diggs, turnover machines and help them there. The Steelers are going to need to give him some cornerbacks that can do that. Joey Porter Jr. looked like a shutdown corner this year for sure. But as has been his whole tenure, even back to the days of Penn State, he wasn't a turnover guy. He was the guy that was going to erase someone. You didn't even try to throw it to him. They need guys in the secondary that can create these kind of turnover worthy plays. That's what has to happen. And if Joe Whitt can help, foster that, or if he can help, cultivate that, more power to him. That'd be a really big positive for him, and maybe that can fill a void that's in on this defense right now, because the defense, when it's at its best, it's been a turnover defense. It's created havoc, and it's caused turnovers, and things have come from that. And so I think it's going to be interesting to see how he impacts things. But again, back to Brian Angelichio, who we were talking about. The tight end development there, but especially, the passing game structuring. I know some people are like, Mike McCarthy's calling the plays. The offensive coordinator doesn't need to do anything. Offensive coordinator does a lot behind the scenes as far as organizing the game plans, matching them up with what your players do best, what they're not doing best, and then also what your opponents do best and worst. And so, so I think it's going to be fine to have a guy like Angelichio taking over that position. Just like I think it could be fine for Joe Whitt Jr. Now, again, it doesn't mean that these guys are definitely going to accomplish those missions, that those things are going to just automatically going to happen in Pittsburgh. But this is where I think it's going to be interesting to see how Mike McCarthy's staff takes shape and the autonomy that he gives to his coaches, because Mike Tomlin gave a lot of autonomy. Like, his guys, Terrell Austin could call the plays, Arthur Smith could call the plays, guys would work amongst their things. He would just kind of oversee and make that happen. I'll be intrigued to see how loose Mike McCarthy is with letting his coaches do similar things.
And I think the one thing we notice is coaches get older and get more seasoned and around the league longer. They tend to, hold tight to some things. But then there's some things they kind of delegate with. So we're going to see Mike McCarthy probably still call the plays. He's an offensive head coach. Of course he's going to call plays, just like we see older defensive coaches call their defensive plays from time to time. But that other side of the ball, he's probably going to let that be what it is. And, when you're talking about having those defensive assistants, those guys are probably going to have a little bit more free reign. His offensive guys, they won't call plays, but I'm sure they will have a lot of liberty and a lot of autonomy, like you mentioned. And they'll be able to do a lot as far as the individual development stuff. But here's the thing. When you're able to give your assistants and have more staff members to do that, which it looks like that is the case now, in which case, good for Mike McCarthy. If you're able to do that, it allows you to have more one-on-one player development. It allows you to have more time to invest in some of those guys you draft and see them come along, and maybe the return on investment comes a little bit sooner, or maybe it becomes a little bit bigger and a little bit more bountiful when that return on investment comes. So these are all things that we don't always look at. That doesn't show up on the stat sheet. It doesn't show up in the scouting report. But if you put a good enough staff together where you give guys enough space to just, not necessarily with game planning or calling plays, but just on a day-to-day, practice-to-practice, planning week-to-week scenario, now you start to see some of those fruits come a little bit faster.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see how that works there. But I want to talk about the cultural part of this, and a narrative I've seen spread around a little bit about buddy hiring, because Mike McCarthy's been hiring a lot of guys that either worked for him in the past or have Pittsburgh connections. So we'll talk about that next year on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Josh Taylor, stick with us. Be right back. But first, I remind you that this show is brought to you by FanDuel. It's the last call for football on FanDuel. One final Sunday, one last kickoff, the final chance to get in on the action before the NFL season officially comes to a close. This is Super Bowl 60, and FanDuel is making sure you're right in the middle of it with a special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year. Whether you're backing the favorite, riding the underdog, or building one last same-game parlay, this is the game everyone's been waiting for. This is where predictions turn into plays, stats turn into storylines, and every snap feels bigger. It's the perfect way to cap off the season and make the Super Bowl even more exciting from kickoff to the final whistle. If you're a new customer, bet just $5 and you can get $200 in bonus bets if you win. Make it count, because after the Super Bowl, the season is over. Last call for football on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 60. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. We're also brought to you by ZocDoc. Finding a doctor you actually like can feel like discovering a diamond in the rough. You want someone in-network nearby with availability, but you also want a doctor who really listens, makes you feel comfortable, explains things clearly, and helps you walk out feeling confident about your next step. Your diamond in the rough doctor exists, and finding them is easy with ZocDoc. ZocDoc is a free app and website that helps you find and book high-quality in-network doctors so you can choose someone that you truly connect with. I love that you can search for specialty and symptoms and quickly find the right fit. Being able to choose in-person or video visits makes scheduling easier. You can check the verified patient reviews to get a real sense of the doctor's vibe and communication style. So stop putting off your doctor appointments and get the care that you need by going to ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL, and you'll find instantly and book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL. ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL. We're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter here with Josh Taylor of KDKA TV. Josh, one of the narratives I've seen pushed out there is that there's too much buddy hiring going on. You look at the Steelers coaching staff and you see the moves that they've made as far as guys they've brought in. You look at Frank Cincinnati Jr., coached under Mike McCarthy. Tom Arth played under Mike McCarthy. You look at James Campen, long time under Mike McCarthy. You look at Jason Simmons, Joe Whitt. You look at all these guys, and then even guys that have local connections, Pittsburgh guys like Frank, Frank Cignetti. You look at all these guys. There's a bunch of dudes that either A, played or coached at Pitt or for the Steelers, B, coached under Mike McCarthy. And a lot of people have said this could be a big problem. This could be a big issue. But Josh, as you and I were talking about off camera, this is how the NFL works. This is the way of the world. I think people just didn't see it that much because that's not something that Tomlin did.
I was counting them off for you when you were listening to all the things on the list. You mentioned A and B. You didn't mention C. Both. Because some of them are both. They're either Pittsburgh connections or they coached under Mike McCarthy. Here's how I will exhibit what we're talking about here. And you mentioned how, honestly, because you talk about how I'm able to kind of put the pieces together. A lot of this is just understanding how the relationships in the league work and just all you're doing is connecting the dots, really. A lot of it's really not that hard. It's just, maybe some look at a Pro Football Reference page and maybe a Wikipedia page, and things start to click and you start to figure it out. But I will exemplify exactly what we're talking about here in two things. Number one, I find it super ironic that the fans of this city are raising the possibility of too much buddy hiring in the city where literally almost everyone knows everyone or someone that they know. And I'm going to exhibit that by the second thing. And this is purely anecdotal, but it relates to the both of us. Now, bear in mind, Chris and I, we've known each other for quite a few years now. Now, I'm significantly older than Chris. We went to different high schools. However, we're connected by the same music teacher.
He said it, not me, by the way. He's significantly older.
I'm significantly older. I will say this. But we're connected by the same music teacher. Two different high schools, two different times we went to school. But we both know the same music teacher. Why? Because that's Pittsburgh, folks. There's no 6 degrees of separation. There's 3 max. This is no different. Coaching in the league is no different. Coaching trees and assistants and staffs in the NFL and college football. It's no different. It's no different than any other industry. People hire who they know. I'm going to call back something that some probably don't know and some might not remember. if you watched Game Theory when Bomani Jones hosted it on HBO, he did a specific segment about how all the coaches in the NFL in that time were all connected to each other by some form of nepotism or some form of camaraderie or past history. And when he looked at the board of all 32 coaches, 31 were connected to each other, and the one that wasn't out of the 32 just happened to be Mike Tomlin, which is hilarious. But it illustrates a bigger point. A lot of what you see in this league, and that's with coaches, that's with assistant coaches, that's with GMs, that's with front office guys, that's with scouts. These are guys who know each other. They've played together. They've worked together. Maybe one guy worked with another guy's son, or another guy worked with another guy's dad, or somebody might be related to someone else's wife. It all connects, and that's what we're talking about here. So sometimes when I hear that, I kind of have to laugh because that's literally what's happening all the time in this league. And if you're not paying attention to it, you might get confused by it. But it's really no different than any other industry and any other connection you might find between people when someone's hiring someone else that they know or someone that they know.
When I was in law school, I took an employment discrimination course, and one thing that was revealed about how easily it is for employment discrimination to happen and for favoritism to hires to happen is that 80% of people that were hired, according to this one study I read, a few studies, it was well confirmed, but 80% of the people who get hired to a job know somebody at that new job, because part of it is who you know, not what you know. And this is part of what the NFL has become. It's become nepotism. You know, somebody's son, somebody's nephew, and then they know someone based off of that, and you're friends with that person. It's why so many people want to just tap it. Like, look at what the race to get a Sean McVay underling. You know, that's what the Steelers looked like they were. We thought that they were getting the next Sean McVay underling, which Chris Schuler, Nate Shieldhouse, one of those guys, and they don't get
remember the race for Belichick guys back in the day?
Yeah,
how'd that turn out?
Guys, yeah. And it doesn't, and that's the other thing. This doesn't guarantee that it works either. Like, I'm not saying this is the other thing is that, listen, so a lot of people are mocking the Steelers because they're doing this buddy system where it's, again, you played at Pitt, you coached at Pitt, you played for the Steelers, or you coached under Mike McCarthy, you played under Mike McCarthy, whatever it is, they're trying to get you. And that's the reason why, and it's not a good reason. I'm not saying that it can't work out. But I do hear the complaints here, because as I've pointed out on the show multiple times, you know, you talk to the historians that covered the Steelers of the 70s and the Steelers of the 60s, and a big part of what they did in the 60s was they would hire guys that they knew, local guys that made them feel good about it, and that wasn't the move. And it wasn't until Dan Rooney took over the operations and said, hey, let's modernize ourselves. Let's do these things. Let's attack in these places, that they were able to go out and find the right guys, and they built the dynasty that was the 70s Steelers. And so now if you're the Steelers, you're trying to figure that out. But, you know, so I'm not going to say that the Steelers definitely are doing things right. I'm of the opinion that we should just wait and see how this coaching staff does, Josh. Like, some of these things, they seem exciting. Joe Whitt has a great history of creating of his guys in the secondary, creating turnovers, being part of a turnover culture and bringing that together. But at the same time, we don't know how he's going to work with these defensive backs. We don't know how this defensive line is going to take. We don't know a lot of these things. And I'm willing to just give it time to see how these coaching staffs play out with their players. Just like I give every coaching staff that kind of time.
I'm willing to give it time too. And the thing that sticks out to me is that each of these guys comes with a certain level of experience. And that's something that sticks out to me. And while I'm giving it time, I am also planning on waiting to hear how many people are complaining about, well, you got to have the next young guy that can be groomed into being a head coach somewhere else, because some people still believe that's a thing. So I'm waiting to hear those complaints pile up. Or maybe it's just convenient not to when the season rolls around. We'll see. And yes, I'm talking to you.
We'll see how that plays out. There's going to be an interesting process. The Steelers still have to fill out a few more positions. We'll also see the final coaching staff probably soon for the Steelers. We're going to take a quick break, though. When we come back, it's time to get to our stars and skulls grades. We talked about Brian Angelichio and what he did for the tight end position. Well, we're going to talk about that tight end room that he's inheriting and what all is going to come with it. That's next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Josh Taylor, stick with us. Be right back. But first, to remind you, this show is also brought to you by Indeed. If you've ever hired someone who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit, you know how important that is. When you want to hire candidates who truly match what you're looking for, you got to trust Indeed sponsored jobs. If you're hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job posts seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs puts your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. If I needed to hire someone for this show, I'd go straight to Indeed and be very specific about what I need. Real experience and not just a resume buzzword. Sponsored jobs boost your post to the people who are the best match for your role, and that makes a real difference. Spend more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of the show get $75 in sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. We're also brought to you by Quo. New year, new systems. This is the time when a lot of us look at the messier parts of how we run our business and think there has to be a better way. And there is. Streamlining your communications is one of the quickest upgrades you can make. That's why today's episode is brought to you by Quo, spelled Quo, the smarter way to run your business communications. Because when your team is reachable, organized, and communicating in one place, you're not just working cleaner, you're creating more opportunities to connect with customers. Your whole team can call and text from one shared business number so nothing gets missed, and Quo's smart AI tools automatically log calls, summarize conversations, and highlight next steps so details never slip through the cracks. It's no surprise Quo is the #1 rated business phone system on G2, trusted by more than 90,000 businesses, from solo operators to growing teams. Make this the year where no opportunity and no customer slips away. Try Quo for free, plus get 20% off your first 6 months when you go to quo.com/LockedOnNFL. That's QUO.com/LockedOnNFL. Quo, no missed calls, no missed customers. We're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Josh Taylor. Josh, let's get to these grades here. All season long, after each game, I do my grades as the season long, and then we tally them at the end of the year. And those are, of course, with our stars and skulls. After each game, you can either get a neutral grade, or you can get 1 to 3 stars, meaning good to elite play, or 1 to 3 skulls, meaning bad play to all-time terrible play. There's also the dreaded bus ticket grade, where if you were that bad that you got to go, you got to go. And so let's get to some of the grades for the tight end room, because we talked about Brian Angelichio. I'm going to keep calling him Joey. But it's because of Joe Whitt on my screen, so that's not helping. But let's dive into this tight end group that Angelichio's going to have a good hand in. And let's start with the youngest member of the group. I believe he's the youngest, actually, but that's Connor Hayward. And actually, Josh, Connor had a solid year when he was called upon. He wasn't called upon that much, but when I totaled up my stars, he had 7 stars and 1 skull. That's it. That's good enough for a B- in my grade. Part of this is because, Josh, I gave him a star when the tush push worked, and he picked the right hole to work. He also had some plays where he was a good run blocker, and he helped in that department. But all in all, Josh, I thought Connor Hayward once again was a solid H-back, 4th tight end type of guy option.
I thought the fact that Connor Hayward was used more frequently as a 4th tight end, H-back type option is the reason why I think you saw better results when he was on the field. When you have him trying to spread out and do what other tight ends do, you're not going to get the same kind of results because he's not that kind of tight end. He pretty much is the H-back kind of guy that you want. He can catch a little bit, can block a little bit, can even do something with the ball in his hands, including the tush push. That's what makes him valuable. And more importantly, and this is something that I continue to look at as an important thing, and some people ask, well, why is Connor Hayward on the team? Because he plays special teams.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the key things that he's really good at, and he's one of their best guys at it. That creates value, and it guarantees you, most of the time, it guarantees you a roster spot. So, yeah, I don't expect Connor Hayward to get the same kind of usage in snaps that a Darnell Washington or Pat Freiermuth can get. But there will come times, like you mentioned, where you need someone in the backfield that can kick out a block or two and spring your running back. Connor Hayward can do that. You need a guy who might come out of the backfield or maybe in between the hash marks and make a catch or two in short yardage. Connor Hayward can do that. And then, of course, there's the tush push. So you have different things that you can do with a guy like him. So, yeah, for what they need him to be, he suits that role.
Moving right along, Jonnu Smith's final grade here. Jonnu had a pretty rocky year. He had 4 stars, 7 skulls, but he did get our bus ticket grade 1 point. We count that as 4 skulls in the formula. It's good enough for an F. And, it's kind of unfortunate for Jonnu Smith because when the year started, he was making a lot of sense. He got a star against the Jets. It was kind of neutral for a lot of games. Came back and made a play against the Bengals. But then he just started to just not. He was never really a good blocker. He missed opportunities, dropped passes, and he really became a hindrance at times. And he's one who I think the Steelers could be looking at as a cut candidate with the high cap number that he has.
When the thing you do the best as a tight end is your contributions to the run game, you're probably not doing that well as a tight end. That's where I am. You and I had this discussion a couple weeks ago. We talked about the foresight of what Omar Khan did with that trade with Micah Fitzpatrick, sending him to the Dolphins to bring back Jonnu Smith and Jalen Ramsey. It gave Omar Khan this, hey, I can still pull a ripcord here after a year and save a bunch of money with these 2 guys. And Jonnu Smith, he could send him packing and save $7 million against the cap. And that's in one shot. So, and I fully expect that. So that's a grade that I'm not surprised by. And if he is a cap casualty come the new league year, I will also not be surprised by
it. I hear you there. Let's look at the next guy on the list that I'm going up. Let's go look at Darnell Washington. His final grades on the season, 13 stars, only 1 skull, and that's good enough for a B grade. Part of this, Josh, was I really couldn't find too many negative games where Darnell Washington, had an impact on. Pretty much he was either an asset to the Steelers or a neutral party. And part of it was because even when his passing game wasn't working, even when his route running wasn't at his best, he wasn't getting open, he was blocking somebody. He was destroying somebody at the line of scrimmage. That was such a huge part of what I think made him really good this year. So Darnell Washington gets a B grade. Your thoughts on that?
I fully agree. I think the fact that Darnell Washington, we knew what his value was in the run game. We knew what his value was in the run game when they drafted him.
Yep.
What we did not know what his potential in the passing game could be. And I think we got that on full display this past season. I think we got that on full display, especially when you got him in open field against defensive backs. You're like, oh, yeah, he can do that. That's important. So, yeah, the fact that he can do both of those things, and let's be honest, how many tight ends do we know in the league that can run block and be effective in the pass game at such a level? There aren't that many. So if you have one, you got gold. A B grade for Darnell Washington. It feels like the timing of him getting hurt was just terrible at the end of the season. You wish you probably had him in that last game, that last game against UC. You wish you had him on the field. You feel like that timing is bad. So, yeah, the B grade helps. I think it makes a lot of sense. His ability to do a lot of different things helps, and it definitely raises his value moving forward.
Absolutely. Let's get to the final tight end here. Of course, that's Pat Freiermuth on the year. 11 stars, 2 skulls, also good enough for a B grade. Now, I want to point this out, Josh. This would have been a lot higher if they actually threw him the doggone ball, because whenever they did throw him the ball, he made plays. He made plays. And I'm sitting here like so many games, and you guys saw it when I was doing my post game. I don't get it. I don't get why the ball isn't going to Pat Freiermuth right now. To me, Josh, he deserves extra points for not complaining one step of the way. But we only grade on-field play, and that's where I look at him and I say, this was a good year. He just needs to actually get some targets to have a bigger good year.
Pat Freiermuth is another guy that I already talked about it with Connor Hayward. I talked about it with Darnell Washington. But you understood where his true value lies. His true value is not being on the field in both running and pass sets, lining up in line, trying to block somebody, and then leaking out the back end. That's not how he works. He works best when you can split him out and really, really exploit and expose the middle of a defense between the hash marks. That is when he's at his best. And when he can do that in the red zone and short yardage, that is where his true value is. Plus, you already paid him. You paid him going into last season. Why aren't you using him for what you pay him to do? If there's any lesson you learn, get the most for your money. You do it anything else, you'd figure you want to do that with your tight end, especially when he entered the season as TE1. I think we know now what Darnell Washington's value is. We know now what Pat Freiermuth's value is. And if you get him lined up and you get him the ball in the passing game, his value just shoots up, and that grade looks a lot
I think, yeah, absolutely. Get Freiermuth the ball. Get Washington the ball, for that matter. Keep this duo around and make them a dangerous receiving tandem for years to come. Josh, thanks so much for joining us here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. People can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
Just about any social media platform, Josh Taylor HD. That's the easiest place to find me. As far as the work goes, KDKA TV at 7:30. You can find me at the anchor desk there Monday through Friday, and then at 10 on KDKA Plus. Also want to make a note, Friday, February 6th, in honor of Black History Month. There's a lot of programming going on our station during the course of the month. Friday, February 6th, I will be airing a piece that I shot not too long ago at the Underground Railroad Museum in Blairsville. Well, there's a lot of history in this place. So many great stories to be told. And we only use maybe a fraction of the stuff we got out there while we were there. But it's an amazing institution. If you haven't been, please go visit it in Indiana County. But we'll have a story on that coming up on Friday, February 6th during KDKA News at 5.
He is the awesome Josh Taylor from KDKA TV. Josh, thanks so much for joining us here. Thank you all for joining us here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, wherever you get social media. My handle is always at Carter Critiques. Read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette by going to post-gazette.com and find me here on the Locked On Steelers podcast every day, Monday through Friday, breaking down the Pittsburgh Steelers. Back here tomorrow with Jenna Harner, finishing out the week and getting you ready for Super Bowl Sunday here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.